Your Ford left the assembly line with a series of hidden software calibrations and default settings that are quietly grinding your engine bearings to dust and sending your transmission to an early grave. You think buying a brand new vehicle means you are starting with a clean slate of maximum reliability. But here is what Ford does not tell you. They design these trucks to survive the warranty period, not a lifetime. I have spent over 17 years on the shop floor as a certified Ford technician, tearing down blown EcoBoost engines and shattered Power Stroke differentials. I have personally inspected hundreds of premature component failures that had absolutely nothing to do with owner neglect and everything to do with the predatory factory settings buried inside your vehicle's computers. We are talking about massive mechanical destruction, masked as fuel efficiency and convenience. Today, I am exposing the hidden factory parameters that are actively destroying your drivetrain right now. And I am going to show you exactly how to override them before you end up on the hook for a $10,000 repair bill. The absolute worst offender. The silent killer that I see wrecking engines more than any other single factor is the factory-programmed auto start-stop system. Ford markets this as a green feature designed to save you a few pennies at the pump by shutting down your engine every time you come to a red light. But from a mechanical standpoint, this is an absolute horror show. Every single time your engine stops, the oil pump stops spinning. Within seconds, the pressurized oil film between your crankshaft and your engine bearings drains away. When the light turns green and the engine cranks back up, those metal surfaces rub directly against each other for a fraction of a second before oil pressure can reestablish itself. This is called boundary lubrication, and it is the highest wear state an engine can experience. In a traditional vehicle, an engine might experience 50,000 start cycles over its entire lifespan. With Ford's factory auto start-stop enabled, that number skyrockets to over 500,000 cycles. I have pulled down EcoBoost engines with less than 60,000 miles on the odometer and found the main bearings worn down to the copper backing. The fix is incredibly simple. Make it a religious habit to press the deactivation button on your dash every single time you start your truck. Or, better yet, install a plug-and-play eliminator module behind the switch to disable this engine-killing feature permanently. Next up is the factory transmission shift schedule, specifically designed to get the vehicle into the highest gear possible as fast as humanly possible. If you drive a modern Ford with a 10R80 10-speed automatic transmission, you have undoubtedly noticed how it aggressively rushes to 8th, 9th, and 10th gear when you are only going 35 miles per hour. Ford programs the transmission control module this way to artificially inflate their EPA fuel economy ratings, but it forces your engine to operate at incredibly low RPMs under high load conditions. This creates a phenomenon known as engine lugging, which places astronomical amounts of stress on the piston rings and wrist pins. Worse yet, it forces the transmission torque converter clutch to constantly slip and lock under high torque, creating immense heat. I have torn down dozens of 10-speed transmissions where the planetary gear sets were completely welded together from thermal breakdown, all because the factory software refused to downshift. You can combat this hidden killer by shifting your truck into tow haul or sport mode every time you get in. This instantly reprograms the shift strategy, holding gears longer, keeping the engine in its optimal power band, and saving your transmission from cooking itself from the inside out. Then we have the factory recommend oil change intervals, programmed right into your instrument cluster. Your truck's intelligent oil life monitor will routinely tell you that you can go 10,000 or even 12,000 miles between oil changes. This is a catastrophic lie. I have personally inspected cam phasers and timing chains on 3.5-liter EcoBoost engines that were completely stretched and ruined at 40,000 miles because the owners followed the factory oil life monitor. Turbocharged engines generate immense heat and suffer from fuel dilution, where raw gasoline seeps past the piston rings and thins out the motor oil. By the time that factory oil life monitor hits 20%, your oil has lost its viscosity and is full of abrasive carbon particles. The manufacturer wants that long interval on paper because it lowers the advertised cost of ownership for fleet buyers. If you want your engine to last past the 100,000-mile mark, you must completely ignore the dashboard prompt. Dump your oil and filter every 5,000 miles or 6 months, period. Spending $70 on clean oil twice as often is the cheapest insurance policy you can buy against a $6,000 timing chain failure. Another massive hidden danger is the factory programming for the electronic locking rear differential. On many Ford trucks, the electronic locker is designed to automatically disengage once you cross 20 or 25 miles per hour. While this prevents drivetrain binding on dry pavement, the way the system handles loss of traction at low speeds is incredibly hazardous to your axle shafts. If you are stuck in deep snow or mud and the factory traction control system detects wheel slip, it aggressively applies the brakes to individual wheels while cutting engine power. If you have the locker engaged and one wheel suddenly finds traction while the other is spinning, the sudden mechanical shock load when the locker engages or disengages under power can snap an axle shaft like a twig. I have seen the aftermath on the shop floor: sheared splines and cracked differential housings caused by factory software fighting against real-world terrain. When you are in low traction situations, you need to take control away from the computer. Turn off the traction control system entirely by holding the button down for 5 seconds. Engage your locker before you enter the obstacle and maintain a steady, gentle throttle input rather than letting the vehicle's braking software slam the drivetrain around. We also have to talk about the factory default setting for the electronic parking brake on modern Ford vehicles. Many owners do not realize that when you shift into park on an incline, the vehicle relies entirely on a tiny metal parking pawl inside the transmission to keep a 6,000-pound truck from rolling. Ford builds an automatic parking brake feature into the software, but it is often disabled from the factory or requires you to manually activate it through a convoluted sequence. When you let the truck rest its entire weight on that transmission pawl, it places immense lateral load on the output shaft and forces the rear axle seals to deform under static pressure. Over time, this causes the rubber lip of the axle seals to develop a compression set, leading to those mysterious fluid leaks on your driveway. I have replaced countless leaky axle seals that were caused solely by poor parking habits enforced by factory default settings. The solution is a manual override of your own routine. Come to a complete stop. Firmly apply the foot brake, engage the electronic parking brake switch, verify the red light is on, and only then shift the transmission into park. This completely isolates the drivetrain from the weight of the vehicle. Finally, there is the hidden danger of the factory active grille shutter system. Ford installs motorized plastic blinds behind your front grille that close up at highway speeds to reduce aerodynamic drag. The problem is that these shutters are programmed to prioritize fuel economy over component cooling. They remain tightly closed until engine coolant temperatures reach a critical threshold, effectively baking your alternator, wiring harnesses, and plastic cooling connectors in an engine bay oven. When these shutters fail, and they do fail frequently due to road debris or electric motor burnout, they almost always fail in the closed position. I have seen engines completely cooked because a $20 plastic shutter stayed shut on a hot July afternoon. You can easily prevent this hidden rot by inspecting the shutters regularly, or like many diesel and heavy-duty owners choose to do, physically removing the shutter blades entirely to ensure your radiator gets a constant, unrestricted stream of fresh air. Your vehicle is packed with these hidden, counterproductive parameters designed to satisfy government mandates rather than protect your wallet. But we are just scratching the surface of what is buried inside these factory configurations. And there are even more critical settings that are actively setting you up for a catastrophic mechanical breakdown. We just exposed how Ford's factory auto start-stop calibration is silently grinding your crankshaft bearings into copper dust every time you sit at a red light. That is a slow, agonizing death for an engine, but it is a cakewalk compared to the hidden software nightmare we are diving into right now. If you thought bearing wear was bad, the second factory setting I am about to reveal is the undisputed king of catastrophic drivetrain destruction. This is the exact setting responsible for the most expensive, sudden, and completely preventable mechanical failures I have ever witnessed in my 17 years on the shop floor. I am talking about total transmission meltdowns and shattered differentials occurring on trucks that have never towed a single pound in their lives. The setting that is actively killing your truck, faster than any other, is Ford's factory-programmed adaptive transmission learning combined with its aggressive skip-shift strategy. When your truck leaves the factory, the Transmission Control Module, or TCM, is programmed with a blank slate. It is designed to monitor your specific driving habits, how hard you press the throttle, how fast you accelerate, and how you brake, and adjust the internal fluid pressures of the transmission shift solenoids to match your style. On paper, it sounds brilliant. In reality, it is a mechanical disaster that turns your 10-speed automatic transmission into a ticking time bomb. Here is the exact mechanical mechanism of how this factory setting destroys your drivetrain. Because the EPA demands maximum fuel economy numbers, Ford programmed the TCM to skip gears entirely during light acceleration. You have seen it on your dashboard display. The truck shifts from first gear straight to third, then jumps to fifth, completely bypassing second and fourth. To make these massive gear jumps feel smooth to you, the driver, the adaptive learning software, commands the internal transmission clutches to intentionally slip. It plays a dangerous game of modulating fluid pressure to drag the clutches into engagement over an extended fraction of a second, rather than snapping them shut cleanly. When a clutch pack slips under load, it creates an astronomical spike in localized friction heat. The automatic transmission fluid trapped between those clutch discs instantly flashes past its maximum thermal threshold. This high heat cooks the fluid, breaking down its chemical chains and turning it into a thin, watery liquid that can no longer maintain a hydrodynamic film. Once the fluid is compromised, the friction material on the clutch discs begins to slough off, suspended as microscopic abrasive grit inside your transmission. That grit travels straight into the valve body, the complex hydraulic brain of your transmission, where it scores the tiny, precision-machined aluminum pistons and jams the shift solenoids once those solenoids start sticking due to contaminated fluid. The adaptive learning software panics. It detects that the shift did not happen within the milliseconds specified by the factory blueprint, so it commands the TCM to max out the hydraulic pressure to force the shift. Now, instead of a smooth skip shift, your transmission starts executing what we call harsh shifts, or neutral drops. You are driving down the road, and suddenly the truck slams into the next gear so violently it feels like you just got rear-ended by a semi-truck. That violent slam is a massive torque spike rippling backward through your entire drivetrain. It slams through the output shaft, hammers the U-joints on your drive shaft, and sends a shockwave straight into the rear differential housing, threatening to shear teeth off your ring and pinion gears. Let me tell you about a truck I had on my lift just 3 weeks ago. A customer towed in a 2023 F-150 with a 3.5-liter EcoBoost. The truck had exactly 26,000 miles on the odometer. The owner used it as a daily commuter, never abused it, and never towed a trailer. He brought it in because it suddenly lost all forward gears while he was pulling onto the highway. When I drained the transmission fluid, it did not look like fluid at all. It looked like black, burnt coffee and smelled like a house fire. I dropped the pan and found a thick layer of silver metal shavings and pulverized clutch material lining the bottom. When I tore down the main case, the reality of what this factory setting had done was sickening. Because the adaptive learning software had continuously slipped the clutches to smooth out the factory skip-shift strategy, the intermediate clutch pack had completely welded itself together into a solid block of distorted steel. The extreme heat had warped the clutch drums so badly that they jammed inside the case. When the transmission finally tried to execute a hard downshift under highway acceleration, the sudden mechanical lockup snapped the main input shaft clean in half. A 26,000-mile truck needed a completely new factory crate transmission, a new torque converter, and a complete flush of the cooling lines. The total bill came out to just over $9,800. The customer was absolutely devastated, and the worst part is, his factory warranty refused to cover it because they claimed the computer logs showed signs of severe thermal overload, blaming his driving habits for a disaster created entirely by Ford's own software parameters. You think you are protecting your investment by driving gently and letting the computer handle the shifts. But that gentle driving is exactly what triggers the most aggressive skip shifting and clutch slipping routines inside the TCM. The factory settings are literally weaponizing your cautious driving habits against the physical components of your transmission. The fix for this is twofold, and you need to execute it immediately if you want your transmission to survive past its warranty expiration date. First, you need to clear the accumulated garbage inside the transmission's memory. Any reputable independent shop with a high-end diagnostic scan tool can perform a TCM adaptive learning reset. This wipes out the corrupted pressure adjustments your truck has stored over thousands of miles of skip shifting and forces the solenoids back to their baseline factory specifications. The moment this reset is done, you will notice your truck shifts crisply, without that sluggish, slurring sensation between gears. Second, you must actively prevent the software from skip shifting during everyday driving. The easiest way to do this without buying aftermarket tuning software is to utilize your steering wheel or console-mounted shift buttons to lock out gears, or simply run the truck in sport mode during city driving. Sport mode completely overrides the fuel economy first shift schedule. It forces the TCM to utilize every single gear sequentially, first, second, third, fourth, all the way up, completely eliminating the high thermal clutch slippage caused by skipping gears. It keeps the line pressure inside the valve body consistently high, ensuring the clutch packs lock together instantly and firmly, generating virtually zero wear-producing friction heat. This adaptive learning nightmare is a ticking clock beneath your floorboards, and every single mile you drive with the factory settings untouched brings you closer to a catastrophic weld-up inside your case. But as devastating as a destroyed 10-speed transmission is, it is only the second most dangerous factor hidden within your vehicle's control modules. There is an even deeper, darker layer of factory calibration buried inside the main engine control module that targets the very heart of your motor's rotating assembly, and we are going to expose exactly what that is right now. We have already pulled back the curtain on how the factory auto start-stop calibration grinds away your engine bearings, and how the adaptive transmission learning code cooks your clutch packs until your input shaft snaps in half. Those two settings alone destroy thousands of modern Fords every single year, but they pale in comparison to the absolute pinnacle of manufacturing deception buried deep inside your engine control module. This third and final factory setting is something nearly every Ford owner interacts with multiple times per week without realizing the cumulative catastrophic rot it creates. It is a setting designed entirely to hide engine degradation from you until the vehicle is well past its warranty period, and it targets the most vulnerable components of your engine's rotating assembly. I am talking about the factory-programmed buffered dashboard gauges, specifically your engine oil pressure and coolant temperature displays. When you sit in the cabin of your truck and look at the instrument cluster, you see a beautifully designed needle or a digital bar graph that appears to show your engine oil pressure and coolant temp fluctuating naturally. You trust those gauges. You believe that if your engine starts running low on oil pressure or begins to dangerously overheat, that needle will move, a warning light will flash, and you will have time to pull over. Here is what Ford doesn't tell you. Those gauges are complete lies. They are not actual, real-time indicators of what is happening inside your oil galleries or cooling jackets. They are software-driven illusions controlled by the ECM. In a classic mechanical setup, a true sending unit sends a variable electrical signal based on actual physical pressure or temperature. If your oil pressure drops by 5 psi, the needle drops accordingly. But modern Ford factory software uses a simple binary pressure switch combined with a heavily buffered algorithm for your oil pressure gauge. That switch only requires a measly 5 to 6 psi of pressure to register as normal. As long as your engine is generating at least 6 psi of oil pressure, the ECM commands the dashboard needle to sit perfectly, confidently right in the dead center of the gauge. Think about the mechanical insanity of that parameter. A modern twin-turbocharged EcoBoost engine or a high-output power-stroke diesel requires 20 to 30 psi at idle and upwards of 50 to 60 psi under load to maintain a critical hydrodynamic film between the journals and bearings. If your oil pump begins to fail, or if severe fuel dilution thins your oil down to the consistency of water, your actual pressure could plummet to an unsafe 10 psi at highway speeds. Under those conditions, your engine bearings are actively spinning, tearing themselves apart, and throwing metal flakes into the oil pan. Yet, because 10 psi is still higher than the 6 psi factory trigger point, your dashboard gauge will sit happily in the middle, telling you everything is perfectly fine. You will drive down the highway completely oblivious to the fact that your engine is actively committing suicide, right up until the moment a connecting rod punches a hole straight through the side of your aluminum engine block. The cooling temperature gauge is just as deceptive. The factory software applies a massive dead band filter to the coolant temperature signal. From the factory, the needle is programmed to rise to the center spot once the engine hits about 160 degrees Fahrenheit. It will then freeze dead in that center position and refuse to move an inch, whether the engine is running at a perfectly happy 190 degrees or a dangerously hot 230 degrees. The manufacturer programs this dead band because they do not want drivers panicking when they see their temperatures rise while towing a heavy load up a steep grade. They want the driving experience to feel completely static and stress-free. But here is the catch. By the time that factory software finally allows the needle to move into the red zone, your coolant temperature has already blasted past 245 degrees Fahrenheit. At that extreme thermal threshold, the damage is already done. Your aluminum cylinder heads have already warped, your multi-layer steel head gaskets have already blown, and coolant is already rushing into your combustion chambers, hydraulically locking your pistons and destroying your engine block. The factory gauge does not warn you that you are approaching a crisis. It simply acts as a coroner signing the death certificate after the catastrophe has already occurred. I have stood on the shop floor, inspecting dozens of melted engines where the owner looked me dead in the eye and swore up and down that the temperature gauge never moved until the exact second the engine died. They weren't lying. The factory software lied to them. When you synthesize all three of these hidden factory dangers, the bearing starvation of auto start-stop, the clutch shredding heat of adaptive skip shifting, and the complete sensory deprivation of the buffered gauges, you realize that your truck is trapped in a multi-front war against its own longevity. The factory parameters create a cascading loop of mechanical failure. The transmission skip shifting generates extreme heat, which cooks the engine oil, which drops your oil pressure, while the dummy gauges on your dashboard deliberately hide the entire process from you until your drivetrain is reduced to a pile of scrap metal. To break this cycle of destruction, you must adopt a comprehensive, proactive strategy that completely overrides the manufacturer's built-in obsolescence. First, you must install physical or digital overrides for the software traps. Use a high-quality OBD2 diagnostic monitor, such as an Edge Insight or a ForeScan setup on an old tablet, to display true, unbuffered, raw digital data streaming directly from the engine's internal sensors. This bypasses the dashboard's software filters and lets you see your exact oil pressure and coolant temperatures down to the single digit, allowing you to catch a cooling system leak or a pressure drop weeks before it turns into a terminal failure. Second, change your operational habits the second you turn the key. Make it a hard reflex to deactivate the auto start-stop system and engage sport or tow haul mode before you even shift into drive. This simple routine forces your engine to maintain continuous oil pressure and commands your transmission to shift sequentially through every single gear, eliminating the severe clutch slippage that ruins the valve body. Finally, throw the factory recommend maintenance schedule in the trash. Never let your engine oil cross the 5,000-mile mark, and dump your transmission fluid and rear differential gear oil every 30,000 miles to flush out the abrasive friction grit that the factory skip-shift strategy inevitably creates. Your Ford is a highly engineered, incredibly capable machine. But it is crippled from the factory by software parameters designed to satisfy regulatory checkboxes rather than ensure 20 years of mechanical survival. The manufacturer is not going to protect your investment, and their factory settings are actively working to ensure you end up back in the showroom buying another truck in 5 or 6 years. The tools and habits required to save your drivetrain cost next to nothing, but they demand your immediate awareness and action. Take control of your truck's computers away from the factory engineers. Implement these overrides today and protect your vehicle from the silent, programmed rot hiding right beneath your hood. If you found this insider breakdown valuable and want to keep your vehicle out of my service bay, go ahead and hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications right now. Drop a comment below and tell me if you have ever noticed your transmission slamming between gears or caught your truck skip-shifting in city traffic. Share this with every Ford owner you know who trusts their factory dashboard gauges, because they need to hear this mechanical truth before their warranty runs out. Thanks for watching, stay vigilant, and I will see you on the next breakdown.